want to explain to you why Cinco de Mayo was selected as the date for a fiesta by the Chicano Club at the University of California in Berkeley in the late 60s and early 70s. And the reason why was because the Mexican Independence Day is September 16th, and it's too close to the beginning of the school year to make any preparations for a festival or a program. So the president of the Chicano Club and also the treasurer and maybe somebody else was in the it was called the Social Science Field Major Studies class. And I was also in that class. And they were discussing it with the TA. And the TA suggested the Cinco de Mayo because it was a time of unity between people from the United States and people from Mexico working together to stop the French. So the president of Mexico said that he would not honor the debt that the previous president owed to France. France in turn said that they were going to invade Mexico and use it as a staging ground to supply the South, which was engaged in the Civil War. And they said that they were going to have all of America speaking French. So at that point, the Mexican president called on a general from Texas to come up with a plan to defeat the French Armada, which was on its way from France to come to invade. And this general was a very religious man, so he prayed about it, and he found 2 verses in the Bible which were applicable to the situation. The first was the one where the Israelites had come to a town that had walled cities, and they wanted to invade that town, but they didn't know how to get the door open. So they had one guy who could run very quickly. And that one guy went by himself up to the front door and started yelling obscenities and throwing stones at the door. And all of the other Israelites hid in the bushes. And when the people inside the city looked out, the men all said, "Oh, it's just one guy out there. We can beat one guy." So as they ran out to go after him, he ran away, and he was very, very fast. And every single man in that walled city went running out after him. And as they were leaving, the Israeli soldiers came in. And the second verse that was used by the general was the one where the Israelites were on top of a mountain, and they were just a small number of people, and they didn't have a lot, and the soldiers coming to attack them were down below, and they stayed overnight at the bottom of the hill and threatened that in the morning they were going to come up and attack that town. So the leader of the Israelites prayed, and he received an inspiration. At that time, generally, there would be 1 lantern for every 10 men. And they didn't have soldiers, but they did have sheep. So they took all the sheep, and they put lanterns on the horns of all the sheep. And they stampeded them down the mountain. And it was nighttime, so when the people down below looked up, they saw all these lights coming down, and they immediately felt it was a huge army, and they all took off running. The Texas general, I think his name might have been something like Zaragoza or something like that, did not have a fast runner, but he did have a very small group of United States Cowboys. And those cowboys had been living in the saddle, and they'd been day and night in the saddle. And also they really knew the terrain very, very well. So they went up to the Frenchmen and they taunted the French cavalrymen. Now, the French cavalry was considered the best in the world. And in Europe, they had been, top class. So they thought, oh, this is just a small group of guys. We can outrun them and capture them. So every single last guy who had a horse took off after the cowboys. But the cowboys totally outran them, and they were at the bottom of cliffs, and they tripped over rough terrain, and they just got outrode. Nevertheless, what really happened was that the cavalry gone meant that the foot soldiers had no protection. There were no horses to protect them. And the second part, again, we had the story about the sheep. Well, Zaragoza didn't have any sheep, but he had lots of cows, the ones that those cowboys were herding. And those cows were then stampeded into the French foot soldiers by the people of El Pueblo. And they had machetes, and they went in and they killed the foot soldiers. And they stopped the Frenchmen from going further than El Pueblo in their quest to get to Mexico City. Now, the fact that they didn't make it to Mexico City that year didn't really have much effect on Mexican history, because the following year, the French came back and they put Maximillian in as the new president or ruler of Mexico. However, it made a big difference for American history, because since the French were not able to take over Mexico in a timely manner, they were not able to supply the South for the Civil War. And as a result, when they came back the following year, that delay caused such a difference, because at that time it was not logical to support the South anymore, since the North had now gained the momentum and was now in the victorious position in the relationship between the North and the South in the Civil War. So if the French had taken over Mexico the first time, then we might very well have all been speaking French. Abraham Lincoln recognized the importance of the victory at El Pueblo, and as a result, he said that anyone who is in the Union Army after the war who wants to go down and help the Mexicans to oust the French could keep their uniform and their gun, both very expensive at that time. He also placed supplies along the border in Texas for the Mexicans so that they would have extra supplies and food as needed in their battle. So this helped to create unity between the United States and Mexico. And all of this was because of the battle at El Pueblo on El Cinco de Mayo. So we should be celebrating that this is a time of unity, and all of us together should be uniting and be happy that we were able to help one another, both sides, people helping one another. And it's a time of camaraderie. So let's all celebrate Cinco de Mayo together. So there was one other thing I wanted to mention, and that is about Coors beer. My understanding is that Coors had a problem where they had fired a number of people of Hispanic descent from working in their factory. And as a result, the people at that time were boycotting Coors. So when we were in class, and the guy who was the president, I can't remember his name, but he was sitting next to me, and he was talking to the TA about all this money that Coors was going to give him and all this beer they were going to provide for their fiesta. And I said, "Oh, it's a beer factory. Don't take it because it's beer." And I was like anti-beer at that time. So, but he said, "You don't understand. It's a blank load of money." And so then I guess they took it, because after that, everybody always said, "Toma un course para la raza." I think that that changed the dynamics for Coors, because they supported this festival.